The 2004 Royal Rumble had a runtime of 1 hour and 1 minute. It premiered on January 25th at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 17,280 fans were in attendance with Jim Ross and Taz on commentary. Howard Finkel was the ring announcer for this evening.
The Rumble that doesn't exist. Because you know who won that one. He enters at number 1 and lasts the entire Rumble to win it all. Just like Shawn Michaels did in 1995. Now I know how taboo it is to mention Chris Benoit. Even nowadays, in 2019, people find it very difficult to discuss Chris Benoit. But whether you like him or not, this man was one of the best performers when he was alive. And honestly, it was the right decision to have him win this Rumble. And this was a good time to do it too. Around this time, Rock and Austin were not around. You had to create new stars. And what two better wrestlers to give the torches to than Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero? So I thought his performance was excellent. I also enjoyed seeing Mick Foley make a surprise entrance, coming after Randy Orton for calling him a coward and just the whole defamation of his legacy. And of course that whole ordeal with Goldberg and Brock Lesnar, Lesnar coming out to eliminate Goldberg. And look, at the time, this was awesome, but knowing where it leads, luckily they redeemed themselves in 2016, 2017. But man,
all right, everyone, and this is my final contribution to this review series, and the final Royal Rumble I will be reviewing is the 2004 Royal Rumble match, the one that we aren't supposed to remember. Now, I'm going to approach this with kid gloves. I'm going to handle this as delicately as I possibly can. I'm not going to talk about anything that happened in 2007. This discussion is going to be about the match and any implications that it had leading into WrestleMania 20. Other than that, I'm just going to talk strictly about the match itself and keep it to wrestling. We don't need any talk about the extracurricular activities or anything like that, especially those surrounding the winner of this match and whatever controversies surround said individual. But that's the last I will say on the matter. So, talking about the match itself, let's go over some key Royal Rumble 2004 stats. Most eliminations was won by Chris Benoit, the eventual winner. He entered at number 1 and eliminated 6 men. Longest time in the Rumble, obviously, was Chris Benoit at 1 hour, 1 minute, and 35 seconds. He started at number 1, went all the way, and won it, duplicating Shawn Michaels' accomplishment from 1995. Although I would argue surpassed it, since the Rumble that Shawn won was much shorter with the quicker entry times, 30 seconds, I believe. Here it was, I believe, 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, so much longer Rumble match. So Benoit's accomplishment was much more impressive as a result. The final 4 in this Rumble were Chris Jericho at number 25, Kurt Angle at number 19, Big Show at number 24, who would be the last one eliminated by the winner, Chris Benoit. So Chris Benoit, he had all the major stats in this Rumble. A couple notable Royal Rumble debuts. The biggest ones I think we had, well, Rhino got his Rumble debut, I believe. I was looking at previous Rumbles. I don't think Rhino was featured at any previous Rumble. And, you know, the last ECW champion gets a Royal Rumble spot, so that's significant. But I think the 2 biggest ones that got their Royal Rumble debut this year were Randy Orton, who entered at number 2, alongside Chris Benoit, would actually get one of the kind of the star moments of the Royal Rumble, one of the key storylines heading into this thing, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And number 30, Bill Goldberg, the huge juggernaut from WCW, getting the huge number 30 spot, and that was cool to see. And actually, there was a huge WCW presence at this Rumble. Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner, making one of his final appearances for the WWE, was featured in this match. This wasn't his first Rumble, but it was his first one as Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner, the WCW NWO version of the character. Booker T was there, Goldberg was there, as I mentioned. Ernest the Cat Miller was there. And I guess you could say, you know, Big Show and Benoit were the final 2, and they were former WCW champions, although I would argue Big Show, by that point, was more of a WWE product, and Benoit, if he wasn't fully realized as a WWE product at this point, he would eventually become one by the end of the year, so... It is what it is. Now, unlike the last two Rumbles I reviewed, the 02 one and the 03 one, I felt like the winner of this one wasn't quite as obvious. I think the top two to win it were Cena and Benoit, given how everything was being built up on SmackDown. I think Goldberg had an outside chance to win it and maybe make his match with Lesnar that we all knew was coming, maybe making that a title match. Angle might have been a possible outside chance as well, so it was a little bit more up in the air than it was in the last 2 years, where it was so obvious that Triple H was going to win it. It was so obvious that Lesnar was going to win it. This one, I think, like I said, I feel like Cena and Benoit were the two most likely, but it was a little bit more up in the air. I think all of us wanted Benoit to win it at the time, and fortunately, well, whatever. But fortunately, they gave the fans what they wanted, and Chris Benoit ultimately won. But I didn't feel like it was as obvious as some of the last two Royal Rumbles in particular. So that was good to see, that there was a little bit more drama in it, and that we didn't know who was going to win. And I think that certainly helped and made this Royal Rumble a nice... honestly, this is one of my more favorite Royal Rumble matches. It's kind of a shame that it's the one we're supposed to forget about, but I do think it's one of the better Royal Rumble matches, not only because of how they handled the winner, and I'll talk about Benoit in a bit, but the main reason that I love this Rumble, and I kind of alluded to this earlier when I talked about Royal Rumble 2002 and 2003, this Royal Rumble, probably more than any other in history, at least prior to this point, except for maybe 1990, this one did more to build up to WrestleMania than any other Rumble I can think of off the top of my head. You had that awesome moment where Kane entered, and he had buried Undertaker alive at Survivor Series 03. And a lot of us were speculating, okay, is this where the dead man comes back? But we weren't sure yet that that was going to happen. The buzzer sounds... The lights go out and the gong hits, and Kane starts freaking out and ultimately gets eliminated, but you knew, oh my God, that was the first sign. Undertaker's coming back as the dead man. So you had that chapter in the story going along into it. I mentioned that Goldberg entered at number 30, but he had some war of words with Brock Lesnar backstage at a couple of pay-per-view events, and again at Royal Rumble. And here, Brock Lesnar, just to show his dominance over Goldberg, ran in and F5 Goldberg and ultimately cost him the Rumble after Goldberg was spearing everybody into oblivion, which looked awesome, by the way. They had Goldberg go in there and just spear the holy hell out of everybody, but Lesnar F5'd him, setting the stage for their match at WrestleMania 20, which on paper should have worked, and I think WrestleMania, their rematch at WrestleMania 33 showed that the match could have worked. Their WrestleMania 20 match ultimately did not work, but the setup for it was cool, at least, and I enjoyed that part of it. You had Christian and Jericho having brief interactions throughout the match. They would ultimately have a match at WrestleMania 20. And it was mentioned on commentary that Jericho had eliminated Christian at this Rumble and the year before, so he had eliminated Christian 2 Rumbles in a row. And they're supposed to be buddies, but there were starting to be some cracks in the armor, and those of us who remember the angle with Trish and Lita and everything that happened there. So we got a little bit more, it was more subtle in their case, but a little bit more pieces of the pie were falling into place for their build-up to WrestleMania. And the biggest one, well, one more before I get into the biggest one, but you also had John Cena and Big Show interacting, and they would ultimately have the U.S. title feud. Big Show would eliminate John Cena, so that was good to see, and it felt like WWE had a clear direction going into WrestleMania 20, something that wasn't the case in 2002 outside of Triple H in the main event. They didn't really have much of a clear direction. Here it felt like, all right, they had planned out their Mania card months in advance, and they knew what they were doing, and they were putting all the pieces into place to build anticipation and to make WrestleMania 20 as exciting as possible. And going back to the Cena Big Show feud, the biggest mistake they made in that build-up, and I've said it a million times, but they should have never had Cena FU or AA. It was the FU back then, kids. They should have never had him FU Big Show prior to WrestleMania, which they did multiple times. And I was like, dude, you just robbed Cena of a WrestleMania moment. And then when he did it at WrestleMania, nobody cared. It was like, it already happened. The moment already happened. So you kind of killed your big spotlight moment for the guy that you were clearly trying to build up. But it would result in Cena winning his first singles title. So some historical significance there. Cena's feud with Big Show. You know, but the biggest WrestleMania buildup that happened in this match, and really my favorite part of this entire Royal Rumble, was the story between Randy Orton and Mick Foley, and this was handled really, really well, where Randy Orton had challenged Foley to a match at the end of the year in 2003. Foley decided to walk out feeling as if he couldn't build up the intensity he needed to be a wrestler once again, and Orton famously spit in his face, and we had not seen hide or hair of Foley since. And Orton challenged Foley to sit in the front row at the Royal Rumble and face him, and even bought Foley a ticket, and they kept cutting to Foley's empty seat throughout the night. And it looked like Foley had chickened out again. But then Test, who I can't believe was still there at this point, I was like, wow, Test was still there in 2004? That's amazing. But he had been beaten up backstage, and we didn't see who did it, and Austin told whoever beat him up, just go out there. And by the way, Austin was the Raw sheriff at this point. Sure. But he told whoever it was that attacked Test to go out to the ring, and he was going to take Test's place in the Rumble. Sure enough, the buzzer sounds, and out comes the hardcore legend Mick Foley. And this was so great, because before the Rumble match even started, and they cut to the empty chair again, Taz was egging JR on commentary and telling him, was like, so Mick Foley's a coward, right? You have to admit that Foley's a coward. And JR was like, all right, by gum, son of a bitch, Mick Foley's a coward. God damn. I don't want to say it, but there it is. And then Foley comes out, and JR goes nuts on commentary. He's not a coward! He's not a coward! And you get the Foley-Orton showdown that you wanted, and Foley eliminates both Orton and himself with the famous cactus clothesline, and you get some hardcore brawling, signs of what would ultimately happen at Backlash 2004. They would clash at WrestleMania in the 2 versus 3 handicap match, but big things were on the horizon for that storyline. And again, like I said last year, or with the 03 Rumble, with HBK and Jericho, if I wasn't excited for the prospect of an Orton-Foley match before, I was doubly excited after this, because I just wanted Foley to kick his ass so badly. And again, you put heat on the heel, you build suspense of whether or not Foley was going to show, and then you give us the payoff, and it created a really great moment. And one of my personal favorite Royal Rumble moments was Mick Foley's return as an official entrant in the Royal Rumble, and then getting some measure of revenge against Randy Orton before he hightailed it out of there and managed to get away. So the stage was set for another grand WrestleMania matchup, and an even better match at Backlash, the next pay-per-view. So great things on the horizon for Mick Foley and Randy Orton for sure, and easily the biggest highlight of this Royal Rumble. But what this Royal Rumble is most remembered for is Chris Benoit, who had one of the great performances of his career, starting in at #1 and lasting all the way through. A great Marathon Man performance. I think one of the things, and I don't know if this was done by design, but one thing that I noticed giving this match a rewatch is that Benoit was kind of a giant killer in this thing. He eliminated Mark Henry after Henry got sprayed in the face by Tajiri's Mist. He eliminated A-Train, who's much bigger than him. He eliminated Matt Morgan, who's much bigger than him. He eliminated Bradshaw, who's much bigger than him. And the last one he eliminated was Big Show. And I was like, wow, they're making Benoit into kind of like the heavyweight killer here. I kind of like it. And kind of almost symbolically demonstrating Benoit's rise, you know, overcoming the whole vanilla midget label that he'd gotten in the past. And they almost like demonstrated him breaking through that glass ceiling by the people that he eliminated throughout the Rumble. And by the way, I thought how they handled Big Show's elimination at the end was very well done, with so many guys. The last guys that were in there, Rob Van Dam, Cena, Angle, and Jericho, all hitting their big moves, all hitting finishers on him, and they just couldn't get rid of the guy. And actually, if you want to see a cool elimination, look at Big Show's elimination of Kurt Angle. That was actually a nice little piece of athleticism from one Paul White. I thought was a cool highlight of the match. But I also thought that Benoit's elimination of Big Show was very well designed, with Benoit using momentum and tenacity to basically help flip Big Show over the top rope ever so slowly. It wasn't done fast. It was done slowly, and he was just building more and more momentum, and the crowd was getting more and more like, oh my God, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? And Big Show teetered more and more, and then he just flopped to the ground. And great finish to the Royal Rumble. Overall, I think this is one of the best Royal Rumble matches ever. For the way that it built up to WrestleMania 20, for the way that it established Benoit and his main event spot, for the way that it had all these little great moments and stories, utilizing the 30 guys to the best of their ability and creating a very exciting match all the way through. I thought this was a very good Royal Rumble match and one of my personal favorites. And it's the final one I'm reviewing as part of this series, so it's glad that I it's very good that I went out on a high note, so that's all great, grand, and wonderful. So, Royal Rumble 2004, I know it's the one that WWE wants us to forget about, but if you have not seen it and the events of 2007 don't bother you to the extent that it prevents you from watching a certain individual's matches, check out the 2004 Royal Rumble match. I think it's one of the best examples of how to do a Royal Rumble match extremely well. You'd be hard-pressed to find many Royal Rumble matches that are better than this one.
The overall grade for the 2004 Royal Rumble is B+.
I will see you guys in 2005 for more of my Royal Rumble review series. Your boy, Alyx signing out.